Hi everyone, it's Lisa from I Dream in Soap. Welcome to my channel and thanks for dropping by. Today I'm making a soap using a honey wash fragrance oil. Now I know I've used honey wash before in one of my other soaps, but it is a really lovely fragrance and who doesn't love bees? The other reason for using this fragrance oil is that all the ingredients in this soap make up one of my variants for my cosmetic product safety reports, which means for me, being in the UK, I can actually sell this soap. Now I thought this would be perhaps a good opportunity to explain a little bit more about our regulations here in the UK. Now, if you're not interested and don't want to hear about any of that at all, that's absolutely fine. I've put some timestamps in the description where you can just jump forward to the soap. And hopefully, if we're lucky, in the little scrolly bar just below the video, you should actually see that it's divided into chapters so you could find where the soap actually starts. But that can be a bit hit and miss. So it may be there, it may not. Okay, so if you're still here, maybe you do want to hear a little bit about our regulations. Now, just as a first off, before I start, I just want to say I'm going to talk about these from the point of view of just information for people who may, sort of from the outside, just want to find out a little bit more about what we need to do in Europe to sell our cosmetic products. I'm not intending this to be a detailed tutorial. I'm not an expert in the details of the laws and regulations. I know what I've had to do to get myself assessed correctly and the procedures and the rules, and I'm pretty familiar with them. So having said that, I am not going to be answering people's individual specific queries and questions about the regulations because I just don't feel that I have the expertise to do that. But I will, in my description below, link some very knowledgeable people and also very helpful people who can help with those queries. So, how does it all work then? Well, for us to be able to sell any cosmetic product in the UK, we have to have what's called a cosmetic product safety report. Now, the rules for these reports changed in 2013 and they got a lot more restrictive. So if you are someone like me who has had to get cosmetic safety reports since 2013, you are subject to these very tight restrictions. So what typically happens is that you buy a package, and this package will consist of one base recipe and then a number of what we call variants. Now, the base recipe will contain every single thing that you use in every single soap that you want to make. So it will include all your oils, your lye, your water, and for example, for me, I always put sodium lactate in my soap and also some sugar. So those go into my base recipe as well. And every time you make a soap that you want to sell using these assessments, you have to use that exact base. You can't alter any of the percentages, you can't put things in, and you can't leave stuff out. This is what you have to use every single time. So then you have your variants, and as I said, you can purchase different variants and buy a pack with a number in and then add on extra variants and whatever as you make more and more different types of soaps. And typically these variants will allow you up to 5 extra items, so a little bit like an extras, a bolt-on pack that you add to your base recipe. Again, it's one of those things that's the typical standard, and depending on who your assessor is and whether you're willing to pay a little bit more money, you can potentially add extra ingredients, but 5 is generally the basic standard that we have. Now, of those 5 items, it is literally any 5 extra things that you want to add. So for example, your fragrance oil would be 1. And then if you want to add any colours, so any individual mica or pigment or anything like that would actually count as a variant. So if I wanted to use 2 micas and let's say some titanium dioxide, that would take up 3 of my extras space in my variant. And then you could put in other things like botanicals would count. So if you wanted to put in maybe some poppy seeds or sprinkle some calendula flowers on the top of your soap, those would be extras as well. And also if you wanted to do anything like, for example, increase your superfat in a certain type of soap, adding an extra bit of oil on top of your base oils, that would count as well. So those are how you make up your variant packs. So each time you make a soap, you grab your base recipe and one of your variant packs and you pop those 2 together and that gives you your soap. And remember, we can't change anything at all. In our base and in our extras, we have to list the quantities that we want to use. And also for things like fragrance oils and micas, it's very typical that you also have to list the supplier that you use. So for example, in my soap that I make under this variant, one of the micas I use is Golden Shimmer from Mica Mama. I always have to use Golden Shimmer from Mica Mama. I can't swap it in for a different mica, or even if I could find this mica, I can't swap it in from a different supplier. If you wanted to do any swapping, then that would mean you then having to generate a new variant and paying for that variant on top of what you've already got if you haven't got any sort of variants left in your pack. So those are our cosmetic product safety reports, well, sort of a little brief overview. On top of that, we have to do all sorts of things like keep product information file where we list all the ingredients that we've used, the batch numbers coming in from our suppliers, and we also have to register all of our products on a cosmetic portal. So there is quite a lot of it that goes on if you want to legally sell your soap in the UK. Now I know some of you may be saying, hang on a minute, hasn't the UK left Europe? Sort of, we're on our way out. But it's quite likely that even when that transition is complete, our regulations aren't going to change very much. Phew, come on, let's go and make some legally saleable soap.
I want my soap to look like a beehive. In particular, you know, one of those cartoon type beehives that you see. So what I'm going to do is try and curve the bottom of my mould by filling it with some silicone in the corners to get that nice dome shape. And then I'm going to build the beehive upside down in my soap mould. So I've just got my normal 2-part silicone. I'll leave a link to it in the description below, and my loaf mould. And I'm going to take this piece of pipe. This is just a piece of drain pipe that I've got. I have quite a few of these kicking around that I use for pipe dividers, and I've just literally cut this to the exact length of my mould, including those little caps, which I also had lying around because I use this for making embeds, and it fits really snugly into this mould. So what I'm going to do is pour a little bit of silicone into the mould. So I've worked out how much silicone I need by just measuring the area that I want to fill and just working out the volume. And I'm just going to mix my silicone up. Mine mixes in a 1-to-1 mix, just stir it all together. And then I'll pour it straight into the base of my mould. And then I'll take my piece of tubing and I'm going to push it into the mould just before it comes to the bottom so that I get a nice dome in the top of my mould. And once that's done, I'm just going to leave that to set up. So obviously we're going to need some bees in our beehive. So what I've done is taken some black and yellow soap dough and rolled it out really nice and thinly. Now if you've seen my videos before, you'll see that normally I roll my soap dough out between bits of cling wrap, but I've upgraded here to some very high-tech soap dough rolling mats. They're actually just those food freezer bags that you've got. And they're really good because they're nice and strong and they don't get all crinkly. And I found that I can just wash these really easily, hang them up to dry, and then just keep reusing them. So I'm going to take my nice flat bits of soap dough and layer them together, and then just keep rolling them and layering them so I get a nice little bank of black and yellow soap dough to make my bee bodies. So now I've got my stripy soap dough to the thickness that I want, I'm going to cut it into strips. Now you may find it useful to just do a little spray of some rubbing alcohol on the top of the soap dough and on your knife, and that helps prevent any sticking as you cut through. So as well as the long bee embeds I'm going to have in the middle of my soap, I want some individual bees on the top of each bar. So here I'm just taking the bits that didn't end up being full embed size and just chopping them up, and then I'm just going to squeeze them and shape them into little bee body shapes. And then just rolling up some other little scrap bits of that stripy soap batter. I'm going to make some little bee heads and stick them onto the bee bodies. And then for the long embeds going in the middle, I'm just going to squidge them a bit and round off the top for the head end and make a little pointy tail at the base end. I've made a little extruder disc in the shape of a bee wing, and I'm just going to extrude some white soap dough. Now for some of the bees, I want them to look like we're seeing them from sideways on. So I'm just going to use some distilled water to stick one of the bee wings onto those bees. And then I'll do the same for the other bees, but I'll put a wing on both sides. And then for my individual bees on the top, I'm just going to roll out some more soap dough nice and thinly, and then just draw out some bee wing shapes. Scratch the tops a little to make it look like the veins in the wing, and again use some distilled water to put those on top of the individual bees. So to make the beehive part of my soap, I'm going to be using Golden Shimmer, Sunshine Yellow and Black Gold, all from Mica Mama in the UK. So I'm going to start off by mixing up some batter for the outside of the beehive. So for this I'm using the Black Gold mica. And as I want this entire batch just one single colour, I'm going to add it to my oils, mix it into the oils before I add my lye solution. Now I'm going to be piping this onto the soap mould because I want to get that ridged effect on the outside of the beehive. So I'm just going to bring this up to a fairly decent trace, and then I'm going to leave it until it comes to a piping consistency. I'll check back on it every now and again and just give it a nice stir just to make sure it's thickening up evenly. So once it's all set, I'll just transfer it into my piping bag. I'm using a round number 8 Wilton tip to pipe the outside of the beehive. So if you then remember that little silicone thing that I made to give me the round top to my beehive, I'm just going to pipe into there first, and then I'll pop that into the mould and then pipe round the rest of the mould to finish it off. And then I'm going to take my 2 bees that I made that we're looking at from the side view, and I'm just going to pop them into the mould so it looks like they're resting on the inside of the wall of the beehive. So now time to make up the batter to fill the beehive in and then drop in the rest of those bees. So I'm just going to make everything that I need for the inside of the loaf in one go. So I'll bring my batter up to emulsion, then I'm going to split it into 3 parts. Main bit for the inside, I want the golden shimmer and the sunshine yellow, but then I'm just going to have a little bit for the top, which will eventually form the floor of the beehive. And also spend a little while changing jugs, because once again I've got it in something that's a little bit too small. And then I'll add my fragrance oil just before I'm ready to pour. I'm using Honey Wash from Grace Fruit in the UK, and this does accelerate a little bit, that's why I'm leaving it to the last moment to add it. And then I'll alternate my 2 colours in a drop swirl type style and then pop in the bees as I come up through the mould. I'll let that set up for just a couple of minutes and then add my last little bit of fragrance oil to the last little bit of batter. and then just using a spatula to break the fall, I'll just pour that last layer in, which is going to be the floor of the beehive. I'm not going to do any swirls or anything on the top here, because remember this is going to end up being the bottom of the soap. So I'll just tidy up the top of the soap and then I will cover it. And then because I do a water discount, I'm going to force gel on it by popping it in the oven. So turn the oven on at 170 degrees F, which is about 75 degrees C. As soon as the soap goes in, turn the oven off and leave it there overnight. So the next day I unmoulded the soap and it actually came out of that silicone insert really easily. So what I'm doing now is I'm just taking away a little bit of the beehive, and I'm going to put in a bit of fresh soap batter and drop in a little individual bee so that they line up with each of the individual bars. And then I left it for another day just to make sure those bees were nice and firm on the top, and then we're ready for the cut. I do really like the soap. I hope you do too. I think the bees are really cute and I'm really pleased with how that beehive came out. I could see using that sort of technique for all different types of soaps, you know, sort of like dessert type soaps or even sort of like a treasure chest or something. It's sort of making me think of all those ideas. Anyway, I hope you've enjoyed this video and that you do like the soap. If you have, it would be great if you left me a thumbs up. If you'd like to see what I'm making in the future, why not subscribe to my channel? If you've got any questions or comments, then please leave them in the comment section below and I will get back to you. I'll leave you with a couple of pictures of the finished soap. Thanks for watching everyone. Happy soaping!